How do you know? Reality-confirmed personal gnosis. Hi, La Muerte, or do you want to be called by another name? You can call me Persephone. I think this issue of distinguishing reality from delusion is an important one for self-professed vampires. I'll try to respond to it. I hope others will too. First, establishing sanity. I've seen a psychologist in the past for depression and relationship issues. He never indicated that I had any mental illness. Vampirism was never brought up in our sessions because I didn't think I was a vampire and had no reason to discuss such ideas. Second, are the perceived sensations of prana hunger and psi feeding delusions based on preconceived expectations? That's a good question. I think sometimes they are, but other times they aren't. When I first had some of these sensations, I knew nothing about the vampire subculture. My first experience were from dreams I had in the early 1980s, when I was a teenager, long before the subject of psychic vampirism became popular in the media. There were small enclaves of self-professed vampires at this time, but I didn't know anything about them. I didn't find the online vampire community until August of 2005, so any experiences I had before then couldn't have been influenced by preconceived expectations. These were not feelings I had all the time, only occasionally, only a period of 25 years. I sometimes had periods when I felt like a vampire, but I didn't think I really was one. I sometimes dreamt of being a vampire and feeding off people in my dreams. A few times, when I did this, I woke up feeling energized. My explanation for such sensations was that it was a psychosomatic reaction caused by reading or watching too much vampire fiction. It wasn't until I read posts at vampire forums, read the Psychic Vampire Codex, and took a survey for the AVA's Vampirism and Energy Work Research Study that I thought I might be some kind of psychic vampire. I realized that when I felt like a hungry vampire, I would usually dream of feeding on someone, and after that I felt better. Also, a couple times, the person I dreamt of feeding from acted oddly toward me the next day. Once it was a co-worker who I thought acted weird. Another time it was my boyfriend, who leapt out of bed and looked at me in horror. He kept saying, "What are you? What are you?" until I got him to calm down and come back to bed. After I read the Psychic Vampire Codex, I decided to test if I could psi feed to make my perceived cravings go away, instead of assuming they were just psychosomatic. Listening to a lecture at a psychic fair, I tried to breathe in the psi energy from the room. The woman sitting directly in front of me started acting uncomfortable and ended up moving to the other side of the room. Still, I didn't want to believe I was a psychic vampire, so I allowed myself to dismiss the incident as coincidence. After I met my first self-professed vampires in person, I felt like their energy was attractive to mine. I liked being around them. I felt like one of them drew energy off me. I felt like I could sense subtle energy in ways I hadn't before. I also started to get more intense sensations of hunger and irritability than I'd had before. At work, I'd feel like every cell in my body was screaming, "Hungry, hungry." Eating food helped a little, but not enough. Sitting under a tree or by the river helped more. I knew I might be creating these sensations psychosomatically, so I didn't trust them. I wanted external confirmation. I asked one of the vamps in my meetup group what I felt like to him. He said I didn't feel like a vampire, but I didn't feel like a normal human either. He thought I might be some kind of otherkin. Another guy there told me later that he noticed my energy before he knew I was there for the meetup, but he didn't know what to make of it. I asked a couple of psychics why that vampire said I didn't feel like normal human. One said I was on the cusp of being a vampire. Another said I was one. Another, who wasn't pro-vamp, said I didn't feel like normal human, but I could ask the angels for energy instead of drawing off other people. Another psi-vamp friend of mine thought my energy felt more generative than vampiric, though there was a vampiric side to it. A friend who's sensitive to subtle energy says he can sense me drawing his energy and playing with it, even though I'm not aware of doing this. One can fairly say all these people had biased expectations to begin with. So what about the reactions of people who had no prior expectations? The woman sitting in front of me at that psychic fair is one example. Another was a van driver who drove me to the LA airport. He and I had been having a nice conversation until he asked what kind of event I'd come to attend. I said vampire. Then our conversation wound down, and he was quiet. Then I started to feel like I was drawing energy from him. I didn't want to do that, because he was driving, and I thought I might make him feel dizzy or distracted. I tried to stop, but I couldn't. I felt this fuzzy kind of energy around my head. Meanwhile, the driver kept brushing the top of his head with his hand, as if his head felt weird too. I don't think he had any preconceived notion of what it would feel like to have a psychic vampire draw energy from him. Another time I was at work, and I was feeling tired and hungry. I went to talk with a coworker for a while. Then I went back to working by myself in another room. I felt fine now. A short while later, another coworker told me the guy I'd been talking with was complaining of feeling tired. After lunch, I asked him if this was true. He said it was. I felt guilty because I thought I must have drawn energy from him. At the start of the day, he'd felt fine, but I'd felt tired. After talking with him, I felt energized, but he felt drained. I didn't tell him I was feeding off him when we were talking. He knew I considered myself to be vampiric, but he never became tired after talking with me before. I tried a few times to consciously feed off strangers. This isn't considered ethical behavior within the vampire community, but I needed to prove to myself that this was real, and I didn't have voluntary subjects to work with. One time, when I felt like I was drawing a lot of energy off one guy, he fell asleep at his laptop. A couple other times, people fell asleep, but I can't prove I was the cause. I don't like trying to draw energy off strangers like that, because I don't think it's fair to them. Third, the principle of Occam's razor. Occam's razor is why I decided I must be vampiric. I kept inventing all these convoluted explanations for the sensations and experiences I had. I thought it was cool that other people were vampires, but I didn't want to be one. I didn't want the responsibility of having to feed on other people. I still don't want to actually, which is why I don't practice feeding techniques as often as I should. Anyway, when I was experiencing all these weird hunger sensations, I kept telling myself they were psychosomatic. They were the result of stress or being tired. As I was writing this down in my diary, I realized how ridiculous that sounded. I thought, normal people don't have strange sensations of energy rolling under their skin, feel like every cell in their body is screaming hungry, hungry, or have their hunger go away when they sit under a tree. I thought, normal people just feel tired and go to sleep. I decided, using Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation was that I was a psychic vampire. You say this has to be the simplest natural solution, but psychic vampirism may be natural. I think belief in a soul, in energy bodies, and in subtle energies is natural. Most cultures believe in these things. It's only our culture, so obsessed with material explanations and so dismissive of spiritual ones, that sees belief in spirit as something foolish. I'm not dismissive of science, but I'm not dismissive of paranormal phenomena either. Logic and testing can and should be applied to paranormal phenomena. When one looks at human experiences with a truly open mind, one encounters phenomena that can't be easily explained with standard scientific theories. Twisting accepted natural explanations around to fit the phenomena is not following Occam's razor any more than ignoring natural explanations is. One should look at all possible natural explanations first, but when none of those seems likely, the explanation may be an unexpected one. Sometimes the simplest explanation is that what's happening lies outside of accepted scientific theories. I love your line, reality is that which when you stop believing in it doesn't go away. For 25 years I didn't think I was a vampire, but I still had these weird hunger sensations, and I still had people act like I fed on them in dreams. When I don't announce that I'm trying to feed off someone, they still react as if I am. When I don't think I'm feeding off other people, other people still say they feel like I am. Even though they or I might not believe this is real, they react as if it is. Depression is one of the so-called symptoms of low pranic energy. But I didn't know this until a few years ago. I had bouts of depression through most of my life, which I learned to control with St. John's wort. When I got really depressed, my body temperature would drop. Is that normal? I don't know what physiological process would account for such a reaction. A Psyvamp friend of mine has his body temperature drop when his prana level is low too. He didn't know at first why he was so cold. I suggested he might need to feed. After he did, his body temperature went back to normal. One can argue this is just a subjective perception, but when people shake his hand, they often comment on how cold it is. When sitting next to him, they sometimes comment on feeling cold too.